and fascinating.
Because we're animals too. And this is what's been bothering me so much recently. Frick. I always do that. At least once an episode.
Just your headphones, though. That's good.
This is what's bothering me. And I'll see. Fuck my arm. My elbow hurts so much. But it's been getting better. I'll see if you have any perspective on this. Because I've been struggling with animals.
Okay.
And I'm coming to a point where we are animals, okay? And so my thing is, what separates us from animals? What gives us the right to do the things we do? Like build, kill other animals, pretty much monopolize the fucking world when we are just one of them, but we have the ability to.
I don't think it gives us the right.
I don't think it does either, so why are we doing it? You know?
That's a good question.
And I'm like, how am I supposed to like go on eating the foods I did? Fuck me and these fucking microphone stupid wires. Damn it. We should have went with Tesla's wireless shit.
Under the wire.
I should go under the wire. But it's I'm just like I don't know, cuz we literally just evolved differently and we evolved with like there's the cooking hypothesis, which is when we were primates or Neanderthals. I think it was a little bit before Neanderthals, it was like Anthropithecus or Africanus or some shit like that. Our brains started to get bigger because we found fire. Whoa,
that was the first
fire. Yeah, and then since we were able to cook our foods, we would be able to get the nutrients.
Eating cooked foods instead of raw foods.
Exactly. Yeah. So our intestines would shrink, and our guts would get smaller, and that energy. Like, because your body is balanced with all this stuff.
Goes to your mind.
To your mind, and your brain can then expand and get bigger. So the fact that we found fire first and had opposable thumbs to control it and do this stuff and manipulate our environment, the fact that we're walking upright too, no one even knows why we're doing that instead of like quadrupeds.
Slower, yeah.
It doesn't make sense how we started walking upright. But the fact that we can do this, that's like the only reason why we're here. But what if a dog did that? And
it's like the opinion that if you get somewhere first, you claim it, like it's yours. So we were the first to evolve to do these certain things, so we're saying like it's our right to do. But
I don't know how I feel, like, because we're talking about human equality or human peace on earth. Everyone gets food, there's no hunger anymore, or all this shit. But in the animal kingdom,
dog eat dog.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to be different than them. And if we do get to a point where everyone's fed and we have peace in humanity, are we going to try to solve them too? Like,
I
are
was
we going to
say, if everyone is fed for us, that's probably like mass genocide on an animal level. So.
It's a difficult topic, and I don't have the answer to it. So I like, it's because it's really weird for me to think about, because we really are just animals. And I don't know if the mind, because I think animals have souls too, like, because I consider the soul the energy, the life force that fuels us, you know, because we have our meat vessels, which are our bodies. Like, I look at them like a car or an airplane or something. Like, they're just to get you from place A to B. Like, the thing that actually controls you is you. You're the one pushing the pedals and doing the shit, and that's what our soul is. And you could look at it like a computer hard drive, and the actual computer casing, and then the software that runs it, and the energy which is plugged into the wall, which is our food that gets us going. So it's, I don't know.
So what differs the soul and the brain in that metaphor of the computer?
So the soul, good question. So the brain, I think,
like the CPU is the brain, or
what is the CPU? I don't really know computers that well.
It's just like a central processing unit, I think is the term. I don't know. It's I've heard of it as the brain of the computer.
Then the CPU, because it is the brain. You can't have, none of this works without each other. Like we were talking about, it's about the combination. Like, you can't, the heart pumps the blood, the brain fucking perceptualizes everything. I don't know if that's a word. I'm making it a word. Sure, but because all this stuff is literally just wavelengths, we don't touch anything. There's no such thing as...
Oh, yeah, because there's like a piece of energy.
Yeah, the electrons push each other apart.
So we actually don't touch.
Yeah, we don't touch shit.
I've heard that. That's crazy.
We don't touch anything. Heat's not real. We're really just feeling a transfer of energy. Like, our brain just...
That I totally see, because certain people are are just running a lot hotter than others, and certain people get cold very quickly.
Dude, it's weird.
It is crazy.
All this shit is our brain just, and same with our eyes. Like, we see the way we evolve to see. Different animals evolve to see different things. Like, bats fucking see with their bloop, 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 bloop,
echolocation.
bloop, bloop. Yeah. I'm glad you knew what I was talking about when I did the bloops. But our brain is that processor of information, and our soul is just like the thing that I don't think it's breakable. What's his name? Philosopher. I think Plato talked about how the soul split into 3 parts. Like, we kind of talked about this before the podcast, where there's the appetitive part of the soul, which is like when we talked about when you're blackout drunk, like that part of the soul is your desire driven. Yeah, it wants sex, food, drink, drugs, all that kind of shit.
The bottom level of the Maslow hierarchy kind of stuff.
Yeah, and then there's the rational part, which is your thinking, your conscious part, where you can reason, do all this stuff. And then there's the spirited, which is for like honor and victory and all that other shit. And Plato thinks the rational part of your brain should control the other parts. But like when we were talking about when you're drunk, your rational part is gone. So your appetitive part's out, and you're unconscious. You're just doing whatever the fuck you want. Yeah, I don't know how I got to that.
No, it's interesting. I think like, I mean, I don't have my own personal definition of what a soul is. But,
I'm really going, I'm a fucking philosophy mind, and this is what I have to think about every day.
But I feel like there would be like no rational part of the soul, because that would be too brain-like.
Fair. So you think the brain is that?
The brain would be the rational, but I would also say the brain is the appetitive.
Yeah.
Is that the word? So, or maybe the body is, because the body is going to do what it like absolutely needs, and then later it might hand off to the brain, like, you know, you've gotten food, sleep, and water, like now you can go learn or something like that, which gets back to middle school, because if you're not getting enough sleep, you can barely learn.
Facts.
But yeah, it's such an interesting question. There's absolutely no science on a soul. There's no way to say what differentiates you versus me, other than this one innate thing that we can't define.
Yeah, it is weird, and that's why I don't like how science is trying to explain non-physical things with physical science. The only way,
like what?
Well, just like for the soul, for an example, you can't you can't measure love on a physical scale, because it's non-physical things, and they're trying to like solve it with like metaphysics and do all this shit for non-physical things with physical agents. Not agents isn't the right word, but
no, I know what you mean. So there's studies that come out that say like dogs can feel loyalty or dogs can feel love. So you don't believe that?
Well, I believe that.
But you don't believe that based on science. You just,
because that's measuring how they act. That's not actually, well, this is what I'm guessing. I don't think that's actually measuring their loyalty. That's measuring of how they act of a human, and like measuring that against what you do. Like, because I'm assuming the way they measured that is like, I don't know, like a soldier comes back and you see him run up to the soldier after years, and that's loyalty. But like, you can't measure that. Like, how is that measurable?
So, you know, I agree with you, but it's interesting. So, you know, if you say like you love your mother, how can you prove that? And you would say like, well, I've done these 1,000 or 10,000 things in my life that are acts. You know, I've given her this, or I've given her a hug, or I've talked to her, or, you know, given her my time. You can prove in acts, in, you know, physical measurable acts, these things that you've done or thoughts that you've had, but you know, that's the same thing. It's just they're acts. So how do you prove that, you know, you love your mother, or you're, you know, how do you prove anything like that without some sort of scientific process?
Yeah, I think maybe
you can't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because if I was asked to prove if I love like my mother, I would. Yeah, it would take me a long time, but I would list, you know, all of these things, even try to list thoughts that I've had, but you know, any experience that would show why. That's the only way that I would know how. I don't know else how to prove something that's, you know, kind of in my head. Yeah, it's a feeling.
I think that's why I like philosophy is a great way to answer these questions, because a lot of this stuff you can only think. What is the most rational? And that gets back to like the argument thing. When people poke holes in your art, because philosophy is literally just thinking. Like, you can't prove any of it. It's just what makes the most sense. And if it doesn't, okay, let's figure out how it doesn't and then change it. and see if that makes more sense. So I honestly think that's the best way to go about these non-physical things, like, because there's switch, flop, flip into the universe.
Let's do it.
When you're studying the universe and all this stuff, like Einstein was talking about these dark matter, whatever, these unknown particles that were just theoretical. That's how it started. He found it through math, but it was just, I guess that is science.
They're like unknown variables in the math.
But there's just, it just wasn't proven. Maybe that's a bad example because I guess he did find that through physical form. But okay, I'll use this. Back like 2,000 years ago, before like Socratic philosophy, they were trying to figure out what the forms of everything were made out of. And they were like, oh, it's earth, wind, fire, water. That's what the forms are. And they're like, no, you fucking idiot. No, it's not. They're a part of these small little things that we'll call atoms. And these are the smallest things in the world. And they make up all this other stuff. But it was just, they were thinking this. And this was before anyone knew what a fucking atom was. And this is what they called it. And they kept growing and saying, no, that's not fucking right. But you had some things right.
Yeah.
And they grew off it. And then science was like, oh shit, we have a microscope. And now we see these. Yeah, we're going to call them atoms too.
And then they get below that, protons, electrons.
Yeah, and now they're finding all that shit too. But they thought it first. You know, they figured it out mentally before they saw it physically. Because I do think you could find things mentally. Because there's a lot of like thinking claims. Because I think if the soul can't be broken, it means it's immortal. So if it's immortal, then
reincarnation.
Exactly. So some people say, I was talking to Morgan and Elliott the other day, and we came to the conclusion, maybe not conclusion, came to a paragraph, never could get to the conclusion, but we came to a point saying, okay, our souls come back and they're here to learn, you know.
Is there an end goal in your theory? Not in your theory, but in your theory about our souls coming back to learn, is there an end goal that we're trying to learn or achieve?
I think it's just, this sounds crazy, but I do think we're all one because we all have the same energy. Like if we did start from the Big Bang, like I believe in the pop, I think it's called pop hypothesis or some shit like that, or bounce hypothesis, where the Big Bang is the start and it expands till it gets to a certain point, and then once it gets to a certain point, it'll start collapsing on itself until it's all together, and then it hits, and then it bounces back out, and then it just keeps repeating infinitely long. So that's what I think we're at. So if we're in that infinite loop of things, then so when all that energy is together at one point, when it expands, it's just the same stuff, just spread out in different forms. So you and me and this table are all the same. It's just the atoms and all this, the energy, I'll call it, is organized in different fashions.
Sure.
So you and I, like I always use the fishnet example, are like a big fishnet. And each node on the fishnet where they connect is, say, our consciousness or our soul. So no matter how far we think we are from each other, we're all connected because at a certain point that fishnet was all together until it started expanding out.
Okay.
So
it's like every 100 billion million years, when the pop goes back together, you're saying that would be like one revolution of the soul. Like you've done all of these, you're saying the soul is immortal, it can't die, but we come back to learn. So maybe we just keep learning until the end of that pop, and then we start anew, but with all of that information.
Yeah, I don't know. I like it. That sounds kind of cool. Because I really don't know. Because people could say like, hey, maybe you live every life. I don't know how much I like that. Or maybe you live the lives you need to live. Because I feel like some people, like you heard the saying like old souls. Yeah. I think that's true. Like some people just pick up on things quicker than others. And I think people that pick up on things,
they've done a couple more,
they've understood it more. Because if I'm trying to teach you rocket science, and if you've never looked at physics in your entire fucking life, you're not going to be able to do it. But if you looked at physics before, you pick it up quicker. And I kind of look at that as your past lives. But I don't know how many you live. I don't fucking know. I don't know. Do you believe any of this shit? Do you think we're one and done?
I would believe in reincarnation. I think there's a benefit to believing in it because it gives you kind of hope, but I also think there's not a huge reason to dwell on it because it's not going to affect you as you are. Like, James Cunningham is not ever going to know about the X number of lives that you've either lived or are going to live. So I think there's kind of a duality of wanting to have like a hope for a heaven type of afterlife or any various lives lived, but I think there is a little bit of like obsolescence in believing something that's never going to affect you at all.
That's really true. That's funny.
No,
as
but
fuck.
I love talking about it.
No,
It's really
I love
cool.
talking about it too. I love thinking, but it is funny. Like it will never affect us.
Yeah.
And even if it does, there's probably because that's another thing. Like if we do think this world is just and this universe is just, then you would think your consciousness or your soul would have a choice whether it wants to enter a body or not. Because some people, it's not really fair.
Okay. Well, that would explain old souls because that would mean some are starting new. Yeah. Or at least had not a head start, but they started earlier than others, and that would justify whether there are old souls.
Yeah, because this world's kind of fucked up. Like, it's pretty shit.
Absolutely.
There's some parts that are, someone was trying to argue today in my class that life's fair. And I'm like, dude, no, it's not.
Well, we don't know that. I mean, it could, I agree that there's a lot that is messed up in the world, but I don't know if we can, in our tiny fraction of a fraction of existence could say life is fair or not.
I mean, I just look at it from I'm sitting in Syracuse University, food in my belly, and then there's kids that are starving somewhere else that will never even come close to a high school education, and like that seems kind of shitty.
Absolutely.
And not fair at all. And they don't control that. Like, we don't control, from what we know, of where you're born.
Yeah.
Like, and I kind of feel guilty about that, but there's a cool quote that my brother's friend, I'll consider him my friend too, showed me. It was from like Ready Player 2. Do you know that series?
I know the first one.
Yeah.
I listened to the audiobook of it on
a road
trip.
Do you like it?
I thought it was interesting. I think I didn't see the movie, and I don't really have much of an interest in seeing the movie because it seemed very overstimulated. But the book was interesting. My younger brother loved it.
Yeah. Well,
it was a cool idea. The treasure hunt and the
for the virtual reality. Yeah. But the book was like, it was talking about the game, but it relates to life too. It was like the game's not fair. That's why people who are better off have to help the ones that are less fortunate.
Yeah.
And that we were just watching a movie last night called, it was a Spanish movie about, it was called The Platform. Okay. It was awesome. It was like a social critique pretty much. And it was, one of the quotes was like, wealth is not about how you wealth's not about how much money you have. It's about how you spend it. And it's not if you spend it willy-nilly. That's not what they said. But if you spend it on the right things.
I totally agree with this. I mean, you can get into two sides of this, I think, but I agree with both. You can be emotionally wealthy because you spend your money on things that, experiences or maybe like family or time or something that like is meaningful to you emotionally. But I think just from like an economic standpoint, there is somebody who earns X amount and expends X amount can be wealthy at a completely different socioeconomic bracket than someone else. So like if you're making $100 and spending $50, you are wealthy. And if I'm making $100,000 but spending $110,000, I'm poor. You can. So I think wealth is an interesting concept because you can go into the emotional side of it, but even just from like an economic standpoint, you wouldn't be considered rich, but you have wealth because you're earning more than you expend or spend.
So what are you going